The Last Climb, Animal Version. Chapter 1. The Dream of Little Paw. Deep in the heart of the wildwood forest, a young mountain goat named Little Paw stood on a rocky ledge, staring at the tallest peak in the land, Eagle's Summit. Every day he dreamed of standing at the top, looking down at the world below. "Only the strongest and bravest reach the peak," said Grandfather Hoof, the oldest goat in the herd. "Many have tried, but the wind is fierce, the rocks are sharp, and the path is treacherous." The other goats laughed when Little Paw said he wanted to climb it. "You're too small," scoffed Bighorn, the strongest goat in the herd. "Your legs are too weak," teased Dusttail, kicking up dirt. "Why don't you just stay here where it's safe?" said his mother worriedly. But Little Paw didn't want safe, he wanted Eagle's Summit. So while the other goats grazed and played, Little Paw trained. He jumped from rock to rock, strengthened his hooves, and learned how to balance in the wind. Every night he looked up at the peak and whispered, "One day I will stand at the top." Then one morning he set off on his journey. Chapter 2. The ascent begins. Little Paw climbed steadily, his small hooves gripping the rocky surface. The air smelled fresh and a cool breeze rustled his fur. He felt confident, his training paying off. Higher and higher he climbed. The trees grew smaller, the ground farther away. His heart pounded with excitement. But soon the path became steeper. The wind howled louder. Loose stones crumbled beneath his hooves. His muscles ached, but he pressed on. Then suddenly, crack! A rock beneath his hoof gave way and he slipped. His legs scrambled for grip, but he tumbled backward, rolling down the slope until, thump! He landed hard on a narrow ledge. His knee was scraped, his chest heaved. For the first time, fear crept into his mind. Maybe they were right, he thought. Maybe I am too small. Maybe I should turn back. But then he looked up. The peak was still there, waiting for him. I didn't come this far to stop now. With a deep breath, he stood up, shook the dust from his fur, and climbed again. Chapter 3. The Struggle. As Little Paw climbed higher, the wind grew fierce. It howled around him, trying to push him back. His hooves ached, his breath came in sharp gasps. But he refused to give up. A fierce eagle, Sky Talon, soared overhead, watching him struggle. "Turn back, little one," the eagle called. "This mountain is no place for the weak." Little Paw didn't answer. He just lowered his head and climbed. The higher he went, the colder it became. Snowflakes danced in the air, covering the rocks in ice. His hooves slipped, but he found his balance. "Almost there," he whispered, forcing himself forward. Finally, after what felt like forever, he reached the final ledge. His legs trembled, his body ached, but he was so close. One last push. Chapter 4. The Summit. With one final leap, Little Paw reached the top. He stood there panting, his fur damp with sweat, and then he looked around. The view took his breath away. Rolling green valleys stretched far below, rivers winding like silver ribbons. The sky was painted in orange and purple, the sun beginning to set behind the distant mountains. He had done it. For a long moment, he just stood there, letting the wind rush past him. He wasn't the biggest, he wasn't the strongest, but he was the one who never gave up. Sky Talon circled above him once more. But this time, the eagle didn't mock him. Instead, she let out a sharp cry, a salute. Little Paw smiled. He had proven himself, not to the herd, not to the eagle, but to himself. Chapter 5. The Return. The journey down was easier, but Little Paw was exhausted. When he finally reached the bottom, the other goats were waiting. His mother gasped and ran to him, nuzzling his fur. "You did it," she whispered. Bighorn and Dusttail stared at him in shock. "No way," Bighorn muttered. Grandfather Hoof nodded with pride. "You have the heart of a true mountain goat, Little Paw," he said. Size does not matter, only courage. Little Paw smiled. He had climbed Eagle's Summit, but he knew this was only the beginning, because now he believed he could do anything, moral. Strength isn't about size, it's about heart. Never give up, no matter how tough the climb.